Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final PDN Live of 2016. I can't believe that we're already at the end of December, and I was just thinking today on all the really cool guests that we've had on PDN Live this year, and that we're at the very end. And tonight's topic is one of fan favorites. It's Ask Rob Pincus Anything. So, Rob, how's it going?
Wow, it's going well. Obviously, we're running a little bit late. I just finished the last business trip of the year. We may do some social travel next week, but just the family. But got back from Canada. I was up there with the Vancouver Police Department, a group of instructors from there, also from their, I think it's the Ministry of the Interior. Their conservation officers, or like Department of Wildlife officers, a couple of those in there. And it was all instructors. So we did 2 days of defensive pistol, really got in depth into the whys and the hows of efficient defensive shooting skill and the combat focused shooting programs. That was great. And spent some time in Vancouver, a city that I've just passed through before, never really hung out in. A good city. And just literally got back about an hour or two ago and had dinner with the baby. And she found a marker earlier. So we just had bath time, and baby's clean, I'm clean, fresh back in the country. And here we are, final PDN Live of the year. It's been a great year. And it's fun to end with the kind of free-for-all, the any self-defense question. You know, last month we did that also, and we had so many overflow questions after doing it on the Facebook Live, which was great too. And that's sort of one of the things I wanted to get feedback from people. You know, let us know what you liked more. Do you enjoy this format, the Google Chat, the Google Hangout kind of format, or did you enjoy the Facebook Live that we did last month for our regular viewers? Because I'm sort of torn. You know, honestly, there's a functionality to this one that's more formal and more like this is how it's supposed to be done. But that Facebook Live one was kind of fun. Missed you. I had you in the background. I'm sure the audience is going to say we want more Shannon. But, maybe if we can superimpose something, we can figure it out. But just as far as delivery and ease of viewing is really what I'm interested in from the audience from last month. And I guess we'll pick up where we left off.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point for feedback, not only on what platforms you use for PDN Live, but also throughout your suggestions on what topics you want to see for next year as well. And hey, Rob, maybe we'll just get a cardboard cutout of me in case we do the Facebook Live stuff from now on, and then you can just put it behind you.
Yeah, maybe we could do that. We just get a or maybe the 3D model though would be better. Like here,
oh, there we go.
We can interact. You know.
All right, let's roll into our Ask Rob Anything. And like Rob was saying, we got a lot of questions from last time that we weren't able to get to. But if you're watching this live and you have any questions, or if you want Rob to elaborate on anything, just write it in that little chat box down there and we'll do our best to get to it. And also, if you like what you're hearing, you should subscribe to our newsletter at PDN PersonalDefenseNetwork.com. All right, Rob, are you ready? I'm not going to try to rapid fire, but there's a lot of questions tonight.
All right, I try to be succinct, like normal.
All right. When using cover and concealment, is it better to hug the cover or step back a little off of it?
You definitely want to be back. You want to be back for a whole bunch of reasons. There's a really good example of one of those reasons from the tragedy back in, I guess it was June or July, may have been July now that I think about it. It was the incident down in Dallas where the guy was killing police officers and targeting police officers during the demonstrations over what had gone on down in Baton Rouge. And that guy, one of the very kind of hard to watch but worth watching videos that came out of that was an officer staying very, very close to a large column that was sort of like supporting a parking garage or a building or something. And let's say that the column was maybe 10 feet across and 8 feet wide. And the officer was very, very close to it. And the bad guy just circled right around it and showed up behind him. You know, if the officer had been 10 feet from it, he could conceivably have still used that corner, the two corners that he was behind as cover, but also not been caught off guard from the one that he wasn't specifically facing. Maybe his peripheral vision, or obviously he can keep his awareness up if he's not sure which side the bad guy is coming around. But he was so fixated on one side, he got very close to that corner, and the bad guy just came right around behind him. So that's one reason that we don't want to crowd cover. There are others. The reaction time, it's one of the few times that I actually use the term reactionary gap. If you stay back from that corner, let's say you're in a public space, you stay back from that corner as people run around that public space. Maybe there's an active shooter situation going on in the mall. you go to the ready position, you've got your family behind you, and as those people are running away from the gunfire, you have time, you have a reactionary gap to process those people as they come around. Are they good guys? Are they bad guys? And they're not running into you. They're not running into your gun. Now, it's not always easy, but inside of a home, but the general rule of thumb is you want to be 1 arm's reach beyond your muzzle. So if you have a long gun or a pistol, at extension. So if your long gun's up in the firing position or your pistol's driven out, another arm's reach is what keeps someone from being able to come right around the corner and instantly grab at your defensive tool. So 1 arm's reach off is sort of the minimum. From a strategic, tactical standpoint, you want to be no more than half of the distance that the bad guy is. If you're maneuvering out in the open, a corner of a building in an urban environment, a car in a parking lot, no more than half the distance that the bad guy is. That way you can more efficiently use those angles than the bad guy can.
So you kind of covered on being at home. We have a person that wrote in on like a scenario. So you're at home in the evening, door bursts open, armed intruder comes in, grabs your kids, grab your wife, demands all your valuables. You're not armed at the time, but your gun's close by. What should you do and how should you go about handling that situation?
There's so many variables, you know, it's very, very, very hard to give a real answer there. I'd rather, you know, as far as this is what you would do, because it just oversimplifies it. I think that the variables that one would need to consider are the urgency that you feel towards impending harm. Is someone about to get hurt, or is the person threatening to hurt someone so that they can get something else? Is the person there to hurt your family and you, or are they there really to get your prescription drugs or whatever? And you know, if you don't have a training in mentally disturbed personal behavior, if you don't have an experience in dealing with people who are agitated or angry or potentially violent, you know, that could be a wild guess, right? Because what are you going by? You're going by what you've seen in the movies, essentially. So, you know, studying some of that information, the violent criminal actor information, the 5 W's information that we have from William April at the Personal Defense Network collection in our DVDs, and also obviously at the website in article form and in video clip form, we have some of that information about criminal behavior. And you want to try to learn as much as you can about that, because in that moment, what that person really wants or what that person's doing is going to be the largest factor in terms of what you want to do. Because what you want to do is going to fall into a couple different categories. It's going to be take whatever action you can. It's going to be, you know, maneuver for advantage in terms of position, or even getting to that defensive tool, or having access to that defensive tool, or finding an improvised tool. Or you're just going to comply. If the person, you know, just wants the $20 bill you have sitting on a table, and you can give them the $20 bill and they can leave, then your family's safe, you know, and you don't have to escalate the situation or do anything different. There's always the, well, how do you know? You don't. You've got to at some point go with your gut feeling based on your observations. Now, once you've decided on one of those courses of action, which is immediate physical interaction, just go ahead and comply, or the stall for time maneuver, try to get into a position of advantage or gain an advantage. Once you've made your choice, then of course the issues like, where exactly is the gun? Is it in a quick access safe and staged and ready to go? Is it in a clandestine storage area like the tactical walls type unit, where all you have to do is you know, hit that RFID key card, you know, knock the book down, slide it over the thing, and there's a 2-second, you know, process to get your hand on a loaded and chambered, ready to go gun? Or is it in a safe with a combination and the magazine's loaded but on another shelf, and you know, it's really going to be more like 10 seconds to get a gun in your hand? Those things obviously play a role. If you decide you're going to need a tool and you're going to need to take action, the gun that you're not wearing in the scenario described may not be an option. One thing I would just say there, that's the last thing I'll say in my attempt to not be succinct anymore, is don't rule out that the gun isn't an option. There are plenty of times when the gun isn't an option. So fixating on how am I going to get my gun, how am I going to get my gun, could actually just cause you a problem. It's distracting you from solving the issues that are right at hand.
You'd mentioned not going off of what you saw in the movies. The follow-up question to that is, in confronting an armed person in the act of a crime or a confrontation, should the concealed carrier intervene by announcing, you know, drop your weapon or I'll shoot? I guess, what are the things that we see in the movies that we probably shouldn't be doing?
There's a lot. You know, remember that there's all kinds of issues in the movies with gunplay. I would say, one thing is remember that as far as ready positions and where the gun is and where the gun is held and how the gun is held, the director of photography and the producer and the agents and the artist and everyone is going to be much more interested in that guy's face or that girl's face being seen and their facial expressions and all those things, much more than they are proper positioning of the gun. If the gun and the face are in the proper position, you're not getting a good view of both the gun and the face when it's in the ready position. And the shoulders are going to be hunched up, the arms are back. It doesn't look cool. It doesn't look like what that Jack Bauer image or whatever. It doesn't look like you expect someone in a ready position to look. And if you're in a shooting position, very similar. If you're trying to manage recoil and trying to control deviation as well as you can athletically, it's probably not going to look like most of what you've seen in the movie. So just from there all the way through to the heroics, the antics, how many times have people who know guns watched a scene where a Glock gets pulled out or a similar modern striker fired gun gets pulled out and then there's a cocking sound, or rounds are being carried, guns are being carried with no round in the chamber, because that's a dramatic moment when someone racks the slide, or when you hear the cocking of a gun that doesn't even have a hammer. It's a dramatic pause moment, and it's an auditory cue for people who aren't gun people that something's about to happen. He's serious about using that gun now. So, I mean, just from those very basic things all the way through to the tactics, just kind of throw all that out. You can always find one or two movies people put up on a pedestal and say the gun handling was great, but if there was that much gun handling, it was still a movie, right? It's not the gun handling. Like I wrote an article years ago for a travel magazine, and it was talking about gun. It was like a lifestyle magazine, I guess is what it was, and it was talking about movies and guns. And some of the best gunplay in movies are when the gun isn't used. I think of like Road Warrior, where the gun is used, but it's not even loaded like the first half of the movie, or Indiana Jones, where there's a guy with a knife who's threatening Indiana Jones. He pulls out his gun, shoots him, puts his gun away. There's not a lot of drama to it, right? It's just like, here's the gun and use it and move on. And it's not about the gun, or it's not about the tactics and the overblown sort of drama around it. So you aren't going to get much out of movies.
So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about etiquette. This question's come up in a couple of the Ask Rob Anything, but we haven't been able to get around to it. On the topic of, you have your concealed weapon, going over to a friend's house, do you ask for permission to carry in their house or into an establishment where you're not sure if it's acceptable or not? How do people go about that?
I wouldn't. I would, I think you open the door to something's wrong with this. Why are you asking, right? Like if it's fine and it's normal and it's acceptable, then why are you asking? Obviously, if someplace is posted as illegal, then you might go in unarmed, and I shouldn't say illegal. If it's posted as we'd prefer you not bring your guns into the premises, and it's not a state issued sign because they sell liquor there or whatever that state law might be, but it's just somebody hand writes a sign, no guns allowed, and you want to go in there unarmed and talk to a manager or talk to the owner, that is certainly worthwhile for your next visit. But I know a lot of people who will do that on the way out, and say, okay, so I've been here and I could have been carrying a gun, I'm not carrying a gun, and I've been a customer of yours, and I just don't really understand what the difference would have been if I had been wearing a gun. And sometimes people change their minds. Other people will go in first. Other people will go in with the gun and kind of be a smartass about it on the way out and say, hey, I've had a gun and there was no problem. So you might want to think twice about that sign, buddy. When they know it's not the force of law type sign. I think that talking to businesses is one thing. I think as far as your friends go, if they're your friends and they respect you and you're not going to, pull the gun out at the dinner table and you're not over there getting drunk, then I don't see a problem with just wearing your gun and not making a big deal about it. I think the bigger a deal you make about it, the more potential there is for somebody to just defer to no. I prefer you not. Well, now you've got to have that conversation. So there's I always say, like, open carry activists, right? Like don't carry a potentially lethal defensive tool as a political statement. So if you want to make the political statement, wear your t-shirt, talk to people, hand out flyers, have the conversation, but don't make the gun the initiator of the conversation. So, if you're going over, your friend invites you over, you can ask them then, well, hey, I conceal carry. Is cool. Like, we're going to come over and, play Monopoly or watch the big game or whatever. Like, can I bring, I carry a gun. That's not a problem, right? If you want to have the conversation, I wouldn't show up with a gun and then make it a confrontation potentially.
So you travel a lot for training and your work. What advice do you have for people going across state lines that may be traveling with firearms, or those that travel internationally? Tips and tricks for that.
You got to know the rules, and the rules are so very, very different in so many places. But the first step is know the rules, and don't know the rules because your buddy went to that place once or your cousin lives there now. Like, know the rules by going to a government website that has the rules listed out, the state police, the attorney general's office, something like that. Like I said, I just got back from Canada, and I'll get every once in a while, if I go to, Massachusetts or New Jersey or, Chicago for a long time and anywhere in Europe, how can you travel without a gun? Or somebody asked me this week, like, so did I bring a gun? They had gone hunting in Canada, and they said, I've brought rifles and shotguns up to Canada before, but I've never been allowed to bring a handgun. How did you get yours up there? Or do you just get a gun from them when you land? And sure, when I got to the range, they said, hey, you want a gun, holster? What do you need? And I'm not there to shoot. I'm there to talk about shooting, right? And get other guys to shoot. So I don't worry about, last thing I worry about is carrying a gun for a class. If I've got students with guns, well, then I've got a classroom full of guns. I can grab their guns for a demo. And oftentimes with an instructor, I think it's better that you're showing them how to use their guns and what their guns are capable of and what the proper maneuvers are, especially with a law enforcement agency where the guns are all pretty much the same. They've all been issued. They all have the same holsters. So I took a blue gun of their type, and I took one of their types of holsters, one of the ALS holsters, and then used their guns for the demos. I think 8 out of 11 had double action only SIGs, a gun that I would never show up with by any stretch. And then a couple of them had double action single action SIGs, and a couple of them had Glocks. So the need to demonstrate different things with those 3 different types of guns, really the Glock and the double action only are very similar in terms of how they work. And then the double action, single action is very different maneuvers in terms of the decocking and things like that. So even if I'd have brought a gun and I'd have brought my gun, if I'd have brought my, XDS 4-inch 9mm Springfield, they're not the same. So what's the difference? I'm going to need to take their gun and talk about and demo their guns anyway. So I don't worry about traveling for that purpose with a gun. When we talk about for personal defense, of course, I'd rather, travel with a gun, and there's levels of inconvenience and levels of compromise that dictate not carrying a gun or not traveling with a gun. Or, as has been suggested, sometimes I get a gun when I show up somewhere. Between flying, maybe I'm going to multiple locations, maybe I'm connecting through, New York State, and maybe I'm teaching in New York State and I'm teaching in New Hampshire. Well, New Hampshire, I've got friends with guns who are more than happy to do a hey, do you need a gun kind of thing? And if I feel compelled, then, sometimes I'll say absolutely. Other times I'll ship guns ahead to where I'm going to be when I know I'm going to be in 2 or 3 states that I can't carry in, I can't even, possess a gun in. As far as concealed carry permit goes, I'll forward my guns ahead to where I'm going to be when I can pick them up. So, and every year on the tour for a long time, that would be a procedure where I'd know that I'm going through, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. Just, it's easier to ship a couple guns up to New Hampshire, and I'll pick guns up there. I used to do that a lot in the past. From a personal defense standpoint, like up in Canada, I've actually got my bag. I haven't unpacked. I went all carry on. So, I have things like my medical kit, and the one I'm carrying nowadays is a little bit thick for the soft side briefcase kind of messenger bag. So I actually open it up and slide it into one of the pouches. I've got all kinds of stuff in here that are tools that wedge it, the little door stop thing, keep a door open or keep a door closed, flashlights. The idea is that I don't need to carry a gun or even a knife to feel like I have the tools I need for protection or self-defense or emergency response. So that, I think a lot of people, again, a lot of people get hung up on the gun. It's all about the gun. It's all about the gun. It's all about the gun. And it doesn't have to be all about the gun. It's about personal defense. It's about preparation. It's about readiness. One of the things that I'll carry around a lot is this Benchmade bottle opener, right? And while it has no sharp edges, it's not been sharpened. It's not a secret knife. It's just the bottle opener. But it's still got a relatively good pushing edge, and that moving fast enough would definitely cut skin. It's going to affect people's eyes, affect people's throat. It's kind of a sharp metal Kubotan with a good finger hook for my pinky. It could be a finger hook for the index finger and actually act like a kind of a brass knuckle kind of thing there. But this sitting in my back pocket or a front pocket or a jacket pocket or in my bag on carry-on isn't a weapon. It's not a defensive tool any more than a good pen would be. But I could use this, or I could use the pen. And this also can sit in that front pocket when I'm walking around and it's cold with my hand on it. And it's better than nothing. And it's completely legal. So I think it's important to remember we have to be legal. We might have to be a little bit creative.
What other ways can you be creative besides the Benchmade bottle opener or the pen? What are other things that you can travel with and be creative with?
Flashlight's a pretty obvious one. Having a flashlight, and I carry a G2. It's a nylon flashlight. I've had it around forever. It's almost like a good luck charm as much as anything else anymore. But it's good. It's an impact device. It's going to be more force. All you're really trying to do with an improvised defensive tool is create an increase in your ability to apply force to the bad guy. And that could mean extending your reach, or it could mean concentrating the force on a harder surface than your hands or your elbows, or your face, with things like the bottle opener or a pen or the edge of a flashlight. It really is. I mean, anything could be a defensive tool. The bag itself could be a defensive tool. The doorstop could be a defensive tool. It's got a relatively sharp plastic edge right there, and it's also got a relatively large surface area too. So you've got both an open hand, force impact device here that's much easier to strike with, and then you've got this for the pressure point or for a cutting edge to amplify force even more. So there's a glass. You're sitting in a restaurant. You've got knives. You got forks. You've got the plate. You've got your glass. You're at a bar. You've got the bottle. You've got the glasses. Smash the edge of the glass, and now you've got a very sharp edge. There's a lot of different things you can do if you just think about it for 30 seconds. And there's a lot of good guys out there that talk about how improvised defensive tools are a thing. I think too many people think about taking something like this and sharpening an edge and turning it into a knife, and then saying, well, it's just a bottle opener, but you've turned it into a knife. So you're being disingenuous, and there's plenty of law enforcement bulletins out there about everything you've ever thought about for officer safety. They get put out for everything you think that you can do that no one's ever done before. It's probably been done before. Police officers and customs agents and security guards at courthouses, they probably know what to look for. And saying, oh yeah, I guess that's really worn in over here, and you've been polishing it as a knife for 7 years. It's not worn in, and you could potentially get yourself in a lot of trouble.
What about training with improvised items? I don't think there's any courses on bar stools and bottles, but do you suggest, how do you prepare yourself for improvisation?
Overwhelmingly, if you're doing something dramatically different with the way you think about like an empty hand strike, whether you're using the knuckles or the palm, the thumb, it's when you put something in your hand, it's the same kind of strike. It's just now you're extending, whether it's a knife or a Kubotan or the pen or the flashlight or this, you're extending the reach and you're concentrating the force on something, the edge of something harder than your hand or any part of your hand. So the techniques really overlap. If your techniques don't overlap, you're probably overthinking it. Probably the most important thing is deployment, thinking about how you're going to get that tool into your hand or how you're going to get that tool into the fight. And like I said, putting something like this in a pocket, a back pocket is essentially 4 or 5 o'clock carry as you reach back and, get in there and hook the top of it with the pinky finger and pull it out. Carrying it in the front pocket, especially if your hands are in your pocket anyway when you're cold, is more like akin to a centerline carry. Now, pulling this out of your pocket when your hands aren't in your pocket is going to be harder, but you certainly could tuck it in your belt line. The problem is once you tuck it in your belt line, it's not in a pocket. Now, if something weird happens and you have law enforcement or security asking why you're carrying it and what it is, nobody carries it. Like putting a bottle opener in your pocket is one thing, especially when it's branded with a company that sponsors your tour. Putting a bottle opener in your waistband where it looks like a bad guy would stick a gun in his waistband or a knife in his waistband, it gets harder to discuss, oh, it's just a bottle opener.
Gotcha. Before we move on to gear questions, we're halfway through the Ask Rob Pincus Anything. And for those of you that are watching live, feel free to type in your questions and we'll do our best to get around to them. If you haven't connected with us yet online, we're at personaldefensenetwork.com, PD Network on Twitter, or no, that's Instagram, PD Network on Instagram. Twitter's P_D_N. And then we also have our free newsletter that you can sign up for. The link should be somewhere around this live window here, so sign up for that. Rob, we have a lot of gear questions, so we'll dive right into that. What are your thoughts of the 380? We know that you're a favorite of the 9, but what are your thoughts on the 380 for self-defense, since those pistols are more practical and smaller to carry, be able to hide under clothing for some people?
Yeah, they are easier to carry, but they're not more practical. Most people can shoot a 9 much better than they can shoot the typical 380. And that's because the typical 380 is incredibly small. Even like the 9 that I carry is a relatively small one. It's the XDS, but it's relatively easy to carry. I can't carry this as easily as I could carry something like a Ruger LCP or any of the tiny 380s, the Glock 43, those kinds of things, but the 42. But the idea is that you need something in your hand that you can hold on to and operate well also. If the gun's too small, and I think of something like the little Kimber, whatever it is, 938, little mini Kimber 1911 style thing, it's so small that most people have trouble with recoil on it, not when they're slow firing at the range, but in an actual class. And that little tiny safety pushed way back into the hand doesn't really let the strong hand thumb get leverage on it very well. So it's very hard to operate. So is it an easy gun to carry? Sure. It's a very popular gun, that little SIG tiny 1911. I think it was a 938. That one is very, very popular, but it's easy to carry. It's not practical, and I think that's the problem. Now, go back to the bigger part of the question. What do I think of the 380 in general? I think the time's going to come when we see numbers being delivered because of the engineering of the bullet in terms of reliability. For penetration, depth of penetration is the main thing that we're interested in. The whole muzzle energy, foot pounds delivered, all that. From a pistol round, we're not looking for cavitation, hydrostatic shock. We're not, doing that kind of stuff. We're not bursting organs and all that. What we're really doing is we're just cutting and pushing and breaking. So if through typical intermediate barriers, heavy and light clothing, into proper gelatin, we're seeing the same kind of stuff the FBI uses for their tests. If we're seeing 15 inches average of penetration, depth of penetration from a 380, then that 380 is going to be good. It's meeting the standard. That's what we want. I don't think we're there yet, but I certainly think we will be. And obviously 30 years ago, everyone pretty much agreed we weren't there with the engineering of the 9mm bullets to get reliable expansion and reliable depth of penetration. When we get there with the 380, I think the 380 is going to be a great option, but that won't necessarily mean that a micro gun is the way to go. I think the subcompact guns, like the XDS and the Shield would be another one from M&P. I think they're the right size for a small gun that's easy to conceal. It has a high level of carryability, but it also has a decent level of shootability, especially with the 4-inch barrel, with the longer barrel, because you need a little more weight out there to help manage recoil. So smaller isn't always better. And right now, my concern with the 380 is just that depth of penetration, reliable expansion, reliable penetration.
So we talked about the small frames. Let's go, is bigger better, the larger framed like 45s or 357s?
Right, and that's just, then now it's overkill, because I don't need 21 or 24 inches of penetration in gelatin, right? I still need 15. So more isn't necessarily better, especially when it comes at the cost of recoil, right? So follow-up shot speed, more holes delivered accurately over any given period of time that meet the minimum depth of penetration is what we're after. So if it takes me longer to fire the 40 or the 45 or the 357 SIG or the 357 Magnum or 44 Magnum or whatever else you might be, considering 10mm auto, it takes me longer to fire 3 to 5 shots, then it's not as good as the other gun that will still meet the depth of penetration requirement and the reliability requirement, and that I can shoot faster. And that's how we get to recommending the 9mm today as the best option. And in fact, the lowest recoiling 9mm that still meets the minimum depth of penetration is what we want. And that's why I'm now, especially out of these little guns, I'm carrying that W round from Winchester, instead of the Defender round, I carry the Ranger rounds or the Defender round in my duty gun for my reserve work with the sheriff's office, and in some of the full size house guns, that's what we've got loaded up. But in the little single stack carry guns, that W round is meeting the penetration requirement at a reduced recoil. So why not?
What are your thoughts on carrying with safety on or off, having a live round in the chamber? You can have different combinations here. What's the most ideal one for personal defense?
I'm not going to take a lot of time on that one. People can Google my answers and my thoughts on that. Carry with a round in the chamber. If your gun was sent out with a safety and it's a striker fired gun or a single action gun, use the safety. The only safeties I ever recommend not using would be safeties on something like a Beretta 92 or the M9, a double action gun where the decocker also serves as a safety, or where there's a decocker and then a redundant safety, maybe something like the HK USP. In that case, just to decock it, leave it in double action mode. It's unfortunate that there's a safety option because it makes the gun more complicated than it needs to be. But I don't recommend people use it. With something like the M9, you can use the half cock. And it's not half, but it's it's a 1/8 cock. Just pull that hammer back a little bit so it's not resting, or pull the hammer back a little bit so it's not resting right there on that firing pin. But other than that, as far as leaving the safety on those types of guns, the 3rd generation Smiths, the Beretta M9, the USP with the decocker and the safety option, I suggest just decocking and leave it in double action mode. Other than that, use your safety. And if you're going to carry a gun, if you're not comfortable carrying a gun with a round in the chamber, you're not comfortable carrying a gun for defense.
That's fair. What are your thoughts on tasers?
I like the taser. I think, I was coming out of law enforcement full time as tasers were coming in. In fact, the last school that I went to as a law enforcement only instructor type school, before I got out of full-time law enforcement, was taser instructor school. So I took a taser instructor class and never actually have carried one on duty. I've had the C2 as an option for home defense, staged at different times, and certainly recommended the C2. And then I think the X26C was the civilian version of the little micro 26 that they had. I think it was a C model that they used for civilians, which has that 30-second pulsing instead of the 5-second pulsing that the law enforcement model does, made to fire it, let it do its job, drop it, and run away while the bad guys disabled, distracted, all that. So I'm a big fan of the taser. I think if people train with it and understand it, it's a great tool. They understand it's not just another stun gun. They understand how to use it and to train with it and all that kind of stuff. It's not a replacement for a firearm. It's an alternative to a firearm. For people who can't carry firearms for one reason or another and have that as an option, I think it's a solid option if they train with it. They have to sort of treat it like the gun, though. You can't just throw it in a purse, in a pouch, and assume, oh, well, I can't carry a gun, but I've got my taser. Well, if you would be carrying a gun if you could, then you should be carrying the taser the same way you would be carrying the gun, in a proper holster, in the proper position. You should practice deploying it, all those kinds of things.
What about training with the taser? How would you suggest that?
They make blanks essentially that you can use to practice your loading of it, your unloading and reloading of it, and to practice firing it and aiming it. And they're not super cheap because they are pretty much exactly the same thing. The leads just aren't connected. But that's what you want to do, is practice with those, shooting into one of the taser type targets, or any appropriate target that's going to protect those barbs. You don't want to shoot it at something hard like a steel target where it's going to bounce back at you. But a few layers of thick cardboard is good enough to shoot those probes into. But again, the main thing is thinking about deploying it, getting that little, if you're talking about the C2, opening up that little window, seeing the laser, seeing the light on, and then thinking about hitting the button. And you can practice all of that without the cartridges. The aiming of the thing is pretty easy if you understand the ranges and you understand where to put the laser. That the laser is going to be at the top of the two probes, and you keep it vertically oriented or really parallel oriented with the bad guy. If the bad guy were laying down and you knocked him to the ground, got to your taser, and he's laying on the ground, you want to make sure your taser is parallel with him, because that second barb is going to come out at a downward angle off of the laser. So if the guy's laying down and you shoot, you're going to hit him with the top one, miss him with the bottom one. right? Same thing. If you cant it sideways and the guy's standing up and you hit him with the what would be the top one or the left one, and then the right one goes off that way for a right-handed shooter. So there's some things you need to know, but I don't think you need to invest in 100 cartridges. I think you need to invest in the time deploying it, getting your grip on it, learning how to aim it, learning how to open that little window, the little hatch that the laser comes on, and being prepared to then drive it out and shoot. All those things are important.
What's the range on a typical taser?
I think that I think the civilian one is 18 feet right now.
Okay.
And it's been different, and I've stepped away from any instructor ratings there, so people need to check that out. All the cartridges come with the ranges on them, and it's I think 18 is what's in my head, but that's an easy Google. And at the end of the day, I know that there are different models out there, different cartridges out there for different models. So people want to make sure that they actually are looking at the information on the cartridge they're loading into their particular type of taser.
And what about those that aren't necessarily comfortable with carrying a gun on them or a taser? What about pepper spray?
I'm not a big fan of pepper spray. You know, the pepper spray in confined spaces, you're going to get contaminated too. In open spaces, you've got to worry about the wind and the angle and things like that. It has a very limited effective range in anything you're going to be carrying around on the keychain, or even your hand in your pocket type things. In your home, some of the larger canisters have larger range, those kinds of things. You can use it like as an area denial kind of thing, have one in the kitchen. Some guys breaking in your back door, you shoot it into the little mudroom vestibule area, and you fill that whole area with a cloud like they would in a corrections setting, where they would just flood a hallway and try to keep a riot at bay or something. But as far as the close quarters interpersonal defense, it's not useless. You really have to understand its limitations and how to use it. And I think you want to really pay a lot of attention to which brand you're buying. The Saber Red brand is one that we featured at PDN because it's a good brand. It's high quality. It's good delivery systems. In other words, the cans that it comes in they're good. They're easy to use. They're reliable. And they do sell training versions, even of the little civilian keychain models. There are training versions, inert versions you can get so that you can practice. And it's imperative, just like with the taser, that you do practice that. You need to kind of see how that stream behaves. You definitely don't want the mist. You probably don't want the cloud. You probably want the stream. And I like the ones that are a little more gelatinous, so that what you're getting is something that's going to have some substance to it, and it's going to sort of hit the bad guy and stick a little bit. And then you want to know where to aim on the head, kind of horizontal line coming across right around the top of the eyes or the forehead. Even if they're wearing, so what if they're wearing sunglasses, that kind of thing, it's going to drip down, or it's going to get into their lungs. With pepper spray, it's also an inhaled thing. It's not just getting it in their eyes. So there's a lot going on there. You just want to kind of cover the face up. But we have that information. In fact, there's those two questions back to back. We have a DVD in our collection on chemical and electrical devices, and we talk obviously about tasers more than stun guns in that, and we talk about pepper spray also. And we have representatives who are certified and at the time current and active taser instructors, as well as I'm on the video. And then there's we have representative from Saber Red come in, who's a certified. They're one of their master instructors on that DVD also. And if you get that DVD, you get to see me actually getting tasered. It's very exciting.
Is there a difference between a taser and a stun gun?
Yeah, the taser is a completely different technology. What the taser does is it certainly is not pleasant, but it's not just a pain. There's actually a disruption of the brain's ability to communicate well with the muscles that are being affected inside of that circuit, and through wattage, not really voltage as much. And the wattage is disrupting the signals from the brain. And electromuscular disruption was the term they used to use. I think they've gotten away from that term for one technical reason or another, but it's a good way to describe it. The taser is disrupting the brain's ability to control the muscles, sort of overriding it. And the best way to describe it is locking them up. So if you hit someone in the torso, they lose their ability to manipulate that area of the torso. You hit them in the arm, they hit them in the top of the leg, then their leg, the hip, thigh area, all that. But you've got to get both probes in. That'll complete the circuit. And then the stuff between the two probes is what gets disrupted. And there is obviously a lot of shock and pain that goes along with that. And it's definitely something that what we've seen, and having been tased many times now, and full on probes shot into me and everything else for demonstrations, I will tell you that you get over the pain, you get over the psychological factors, but the muscular factors, that the physiological factors of the taser are very different than the stun gun.
Interesting. I didn't know there was a difference. We have a live question that came in. In your opinion, how light should an everyday carry pistol's trigger be?
I'm going to answer that, but I'm getting a little updates over here from Sam back at HQ, and we're like close to setting potentially a record for our Google Hangouts. So text a friend, tell them tune in just for the heck of it. Sometimes we go up and down a lot. This one's been kind of steadily climbing, so let's set a record for the year with our most viewers, and we'll see how high we can get that number, most viewers on at once. We always get a lot of people that watch this, the next days, that over the next weeks, thousands and thousands of people. But it's kind of cool to see a bunch of people tuned in live, especially this close to the holidays. So text a friend and maybe tag them on Facebook, get them to tune in here at the end. Let's see how high we can get that number. And the question was about
trigger weight in an everyday carry pistol.
Obviously the PD10 is finally going to come out into the market 2017. And I started out saying I wanted it between 4 and 6 pounds. I wouldn't love a 6-pound trigger, but I don't want it any lighter than a 4-pound trigger. And smoothness was a lot more important to me in the way the trigger felt. So I want a consistent pressure as much as I can, not a lot of slack and then a hard wall, not a constant increase that's really sharp towards the end. I wanted it to be as consistent as possible. And then I really didn't care if it was 4.5 or 5.5. It looks like we're going to be between 4.5 and 5. So on the lower end of that, I think going under 4 pounds, you've got a pistol that's capable of more precision than you probably need, and it may actually be just covering up deficiencies. If someone can learn to shoot a modern striker fired gun with a 5-pound trigger in a defensive context, they don't need the trigger to be any lighter. Are there advantages at the top end of marksmanship, the last 5% of actual defensive shootings, and the top 30% of what I see a lot of people doing at the ranges with their timer drills and all that kind of stuff? Sure, it's easier to shoot with a lighter, crisper trigger. That's obvious, right? It's why a lot of people like to shoot 1911s. Can be set up as a very light, crisp trigger. Single action gun requires a safety, reliability issues, all those things. So there are plenty of people out there who will tell you 3-pound, 3.5-pound trigger in a Glock. The aftermarket Glock is great. Obviously, there's a 3.5-pound setup that Glock has for competition use. I'm not a fan of it. I'd rather people stick with the stock triggers and learn to shoot them well, and understand that the probability of them needing to have a gun in their hand that is capable of the thing that the gun is capable with a 1.5 or 2 pound less heavy trigger is so incredibly small. On the other hand, the propensity for people to mistakenly point their gun at extension when they aren't really ready to shoot, when they're challenging someone, when they're nervous, when they're going around a corner, when they think a bad guy's about to come around a corner, that happens. And when people drive the gun out into an extended ready position, their finger gets near the trigger. That happens. And people sometimes get startled when they have a gun in their hand and their finger's near the trigger. That grasp reflex is going to put that finger onto the trigger, and that extra couple of pounds of weight might be and that extra, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch of travel, those two things combined might keep a gun from going off that otherwise would. Now, I don't think that's an argument for a 12-pound, extremely long double action trigger pull. I don't think that we need to go to that extreme. And those types of triggers do get in the way of people performing appropriately with within the boundaries of common defensive shooting requirements, right? So if we need to defend ourselves with a gun, we want to be capable of doing what we most likely are going to need to do. The medium length, medium weight triggers of the modern striker fired gun stock, the M&P, the XD, and the Glock, all are right in that range. Going heavier than that makes it harder to do some of the shooting we might need to do at a reasonable expectation level. Going lighter than that, we gain marksmanship, we gain range performance. I don't really think we gain much in a practical sense, and we potentially get to the point where that gun should have a manual safety.
So it's really up to that person's comfort level and what they want to compromise on, I guess.
Yeah, but again, we could say that about everything, right? So yeah. The reason people send in the question is they want to know what I think, as the guy who's watched thousands of students on thousands of classes and watched, shootings and studied shootings for 20 plus years. And I think you're setting yourself up for a heightened level of confidence, and an artificially heightened level of confidence about what you could actually do in a fight, or what you should be thinking about doing in a fight, by raising your range performance artificially with gear that is set up more for the range than for defense.
Heightened level of confidence. This is actually a good lead into the next one. Thoughts on carrying extra magazines, thoughts on carrying a backup gun in addition to your everyday carry gun?
The idea of a backup gun, we have a whole DVD on backup guns, and we have a whole bunch of other information that's been put out on backup guns and small guns. And the way people have thought about backup guns traditionally comes from the law enforcement world. Law enforcement idea of a backup gun was you have this relatively large duty gun. And you're wearing it out in the open, right? So if someone grabs it, someone takes it, if it becomes broken, if they get the drop on you and take you hostage, take your gun out of your holster, whatever it is, these are scenarios that people envision. But you have a 38 in an ankle holster, a 32 semi-automatic, a pocket holster, or in your front pocket, or maybe you have your hand in your pocket when you're walking up to someone, your hand's on the gun, just like I was talking about having my hand on the bottle opener or improvised device or my flashlight when I'm walking around at night. When I can't carry a gun, my hand's on something, because I'm not going to walk around with my hand on that big gun on the duty belt. In the civilian personal defense world, given the size of the guns and the nature of the guns we carry, I really think of the backup gun as an alternate defensive gun. It's an alternate primary. It's an alternate gun, not really a backup gun. So if someone's carrying a Glock 17 and they have a Glock 26, you can put the Glock 17 magazines in the subcompact Glock 26. You shoot them basically the same way. They feel basically the same. The triggers are basically the same. And they're really redundant systems more than they are a primary and a backup. So if someone's going to bother to have a second gun, in a bag, in their car, on their body, I would highly encourage them to consider having a second gun as opposed to just some, gun that they would never trust for their lives as a primary. If you're going to get to that point, then why not have a good gun? And for a lot of people, that also means an alternative presentation option. So I may carry a full-size gun, strong side hip, and carry a smaller version of that gun, weak side centerline carry, kind of reverse appendix for a right-handed person. So now I've got two guns in two different places. If I'm pinned against the wall and I can't get to the gun that's on my back, I can get to the gun in my front. If I'm down on my face, I can't close my hips and create any space to get to the gun that's under the ground. I can maybe get to the gun that's on my back. And again, interchangeable ammunition, interchangeable magazines is a big thing as well. So I think the way we look at backup guns or alternative guns has evolved over time, especially for personal defense. All that said, the chances of you ever needing your gun are incredibly small. The chance of you needing your gun and needing to shoot, incredibly small. The chance of needing your gun and shooting in it to an empty magazine and reloading and needing to shoot again, incredibly small. Like there's some anecdotal information about people in personal defense land that have had that happen. But as far as true concealed carry personal defense, I'm unaware of any recent history example of that actually being a thing that happened. Could it happen? Sure. Is it easy enough to throw a spare magazine in a pocket or maybe even wear it in a carrier? Absolutely. Is it worth doing? Absolutely. Carrying 2 or 3 guns that are of different types and carrying spare magazines for each gun, I think you're probably overthinking it. If you also have your medical gear and you also have your flashlight and you also have your doorstop and you also have a backup cell phone and you also have plenty of cash in your pocket, you have a paper map of the area that you're in case your phone goes down. If you have all that stuff, now you can start talking to me about carrying that second gun with a second set of magazines and all that. There's way more important things to carry around every day than a redundant defensive firearms tool in terms of personal defense and safety and security and preparation and all that.
Did you say personal defense land at one point?
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
I want to go to there. So not a pressing question, but we get this question every time. But people want to know, what's your favorite carry holster? What's your favorite carry gun? What's your favorite carry ammunition?
Well, I got home and was here for about 20 minutes and the wife sent me out to get dinner. So this is what I grabbed out of the actually right over here, I've got my home defense guns staged inside of one of the big mirror units from Tactical Walls. And I went over there and pulled this out. And this is a crossbreed appendix holster that's obviously been used for a long time, and an XDS 9mm. So that's what I generally carry. Usually it's the 4-inch model, sometimes the 3.3, and that was what I grabbed tonight when I got back into the country. That was the gun I grabbed. And obviously I have more than a couple different guns I could grab at any given time, but that's the one more often than not that I'm carrying around for concealed carry for the last pretty much since the 4-inch came out. I retired my Glock 26L, which was a 19 cut down to a 26 size gun, so it was easier to carry for me. Being a little on the smaller side, carrying that appendix gave me the longer barrel, and really what I like is a longer slide. Brings the front end down for faster follow-up shots, and but the short grip. And then the XDS 4-inch came out, and it was a single stack, even more comfortable to carry, similar dimensions as far as height and length, but single stack. And that was the direction I went in. That was, and then that actually, me carrying that gun is what led to some of the conversations that led to Springfield Armory becoming the tour sponsor that next year, and then subsequently being with us. And we now obviously do a lot of work with them.
So it's starting to get to the top of the hour, but let's talk about training for next year. So we're kind of in a little bit of a break here, but I know classes are going to be starting up again. But while people are on this holiday break, what can they be doing to train at home? What are their resources, and how can they plot out their next training schedule for 2017?
Don't do a lot of live fire stuff. It's obviously been pretty cold here the last couple of weeks in a lot of the country, but there's all kinds of places that are warm. We did classes 2 weeks ago down in Florida. We usually do classes in Arizona every year, Texas every year during the winter period, where it's going to be warmer in some parts of the country. So if you're willing to travel, if you travel anyway, you can head down there. There's always indoor ranges. You may have to change the way you train. Change the way you train. The indoor range from your outdoor range. Andy Loeffler, one of our longtime contributors, senior CFS instructor, defensive firearms coach instructor, he has put a lot of good information out through PDN on training at a traditional indoor range and how to do it more realistically. We have a lot of courses on the schedule for the spring. So if people are looking for planning their 2017 training schedule, in fact, this week through my social media at ICE Training Company, we've got a 10% discount going on through midnight Friday night. So you got a little over 24 hours. It's midnight East Coast time, a little over 24 hours. You can get in on that, save 10% on any of the courses posted at icetraining.us. A lot of the other PDN contributors that you see that are always out there for the tour, my other instructors, Barry Kendrick, we've got Derek Poole, we've got Aaron Israel, we've got Mike Seeklander, we've got Caleb Causey. A lot of different people out there, Cecil Birch, they're already posting classes in 2017 too. So people will be able to see the classes posted probably around the end of January, beginning of February. We'll put up the 2017 Personal Defense Network training tour, but all of us as individuals are already posting classes. So you can sort of start to plan your calendar already. You certainly don't have to wait till it gets warm to look around. We're all out there letting people know where we're going to be next year. As far as what else you can do, we just did some videos with iMarksman and with Laser Ammo. iMarksman's been a tour sponsor a couple of years, and Laser Ammo, we've been really taking a really hard look at some of the training tools that they offer over the last 6 months. And both companies have some great tools for people to practice and train with, both on the defensive shooting skill level, the manipulation, the getting into a shooting position, presentation from the holster, all that stuff. And some scenario training stuff, including some new branching stuff that's coming out from iMarksman, and they have a new thing called iDryFire also, which I got to play with last week, where there's no calibration. That always used to be one of the big deals with every time you set up your laser trainer with a camera, you have to calibrate it and let it know where what is. And this is cool because the camera turns on and you point it at your paper target on the wall. You make sure you have no live ammo in the room, and you're shooting up against some place that is appropriate to shoot up against, and the camera will record what you do. And then obviously it can give you commands and interact with you as well through the software of your computer. So iMarksman, Laser Ammo, there's a lot of different companies out there that make some really good stuff you can use at home. But really, I think the place to start is personaldefensenetwork.com or some other resource. Go read a book, watch a DVD, learn, read the articles, some of the magazine articles. I still write some magazine articles. There's other good trainers that still write some magazine articles out there. It's not just all, gun reviews written by, people who read the press release. There's some good information out there in the articles and the blogs. And then get to a website like what we're doing at PDN. Look at Seeklander's American Warrior Society, places where people are putting out really well thought out, well presented information. That it's not just a 30-second clip. It's not just shooting watermelons. It's not just a gear review. It's training information that gets your brain working, and you can do that regardless of what the weather's like.
Make a great last minute gift, a premium membership. Defense Network. So we're at the top of the hour. You guys, we hit a record tonight of viewers. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for spreading the word about what we're doing. It's been an awesome year with stellar guests, and you all had great questions. Keep them coming. Keep topic ideas coming. And I have to give a special shout out to Sam, who's our producer of the show. You don't ever see her, but she's definitely the wizard behind the curtain that keeps Rob and I on task and gets us on camera. So thank you, Sam, for everything you've done for us this year. And we will see.
Even stood in for you once or twice, so they've seen Sam.
Yeah, that's true. You guys have seen Sam. She does sub in for me. So shout out to her. And Rob, thank you so much for all the great topics, all the great guests this year. 2017 is going to be pretty awesome. So until then, where can people find you?
Personaldefensenetwork.com. Obviously, I contribute to the blog about once a month. Obviously, the videos and articles that we publish, I'm in most of the videos, are going to feature me at least once a week. But I'm putting the blog about once or twice a month lately. The blog's been cool. Paul Carlson's been contributing to the blog, Grant Cunningham, a lot of other guys out there. And the articles are almost, unlike the videos, are almost always from the other contributors. It's a lot easier for them to submit articles with some great pictures, some great thoughts, and it's easier for me to get back to HQ and get into that studio in front of the cameras. So people should definitely check out personaldefensenetwork.com. All the social media, Instagram, Twitter, a couple of Facebook pages, they can find me there. I'm a grandfather now, so they get
congratulations,
baby Pincus, and they're going to get pictures of little Blakely May, and the holidays are coming, so I won't be on the range a lot. My first class in the new year is January 7th and 8th in Central California, and that's filling up quick. I think there's a couple slots left if somebody's interested in jumping in on that. But for the next couple weeks, it's going to be hanging out with the family and really focusing on that. Most of the year I'm traveling, running around, and I'm looking forward to this 2-week break here with the wife and the baby and the kids and the dog, and just kind of hanging out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Have happy holidays and a happy new year. And we'll see you in 2017.